Welcome back, friends. We have another exciting segment here. We're going to be talking about dropping data with the NerdGraph, and we have a couple of guests joining us who would be very pleased, I imagine, to introduce themselves right now.
Hello, I'm Paul Frazier, a senior product manager with our telemetry data platform.
And I'm Ryan McMahon, a software engineer on the Unified Data Streams team here at New Relic.
And Paul is actually skiing right now. Am I correct? This
Yes,
is totally
yes.
real.
Totally real, doing this from the mountain because you can drop data from anywhere. That's really
That's how we do.
Story here.
Yeah. Poetry.
So yeah, you may be asking, why would you want to drop data? Generally, we don't drop data. We do a great job of taking all your data in, but there are some cases where you might want to drop data. There could be a privacy reason for doing this. You may realize, oh my gosh, I am sending something I shouldn't. I need to go make some deployments to stop that. But in the meantime, I want to limit that damage. So I'm going to quickly cut that off at the source, tell New Relic, no, don't store that data anymore. Sometimes data can have a lot of cardinality, and it can be more cardinality than you want. You may accidentally deploy every unique instance or every unique user ID on a large application, and that can run into some data pollution and also to some system limits issues. So you can use a drop rule to help manage that. Also, as we talked about, we're entering this world of open source. So you may be running a proof of concept with an open source exporter. And one of the great things about open source exporters is it's plug and play. You connect it in and it will send a bunch of data out and we'll take it in. The con of that is sometimes it's sending data that you don't want. And so again, that might be a privacy issue. It might be a cardinality issue. It might be a cost issue that you simply don't get value from what you're sending into New Relic. So you can drop the things that you don't need while you then go back and tweak that open source exporter to work from you. Related to that, cost. There may be a cost reason where there is just a volume of metrics or events or logs that aren't providing value. And so you want to drop those from the ingestion pipeline. Also, we work with many large customers who have lots of teams. And so there may be a need that one team starts doing something rogue, or you want to manage a team a certain way. And so you can use drop rules for that as well.
So like when I have an application on the side I build that has passwords in the URLs, I could drop those with this feature then. Where all of my URLs include a password. I could just scan for those.
Yeah, I mean, you would need to find out where that is in the data, but yes, you could drop that attribute or event to make sure that that's not coming through.
Excellent.
So yeah, the details of where this happens, just for clarity, because it is important. So this is still entering New Relic's premise at the very beginning. We're still saying like, we let this data in, and then we analyze it and we say, we are not going to pass this down the pipeline. So we're not going to alert on it. We're not going to store it. It is going to have no concept of ever really being at New Relic. So we do drop it very quickly. Doesn't get stored, doesn't get alerted on. So that's the reality of it there. And then you configure these via what we affectionately call NerdGraph, which is our version of GraphiQL. So we have a bunch of documentations on how to do this. We have the technical documentation, which we'll show you a little bit of here in a minute. We have a blog that walks you through some of this use case. And then of course we have the GraphQL endpoint. And also in our logging product, there is a UI specific to logs that allows you to configure some drop rules on your logging data if there's some logs for whatever reason you don't want.
So I want to confirm that the data comes in on our ingest pipeline. I'm sending it up to the mothership to New Relic. And New Relic grabs it, and while it is still held in memory only, we determine this is data that you've asked us not to store permanently, and we toss it before it ever gets it to the database.
I'll let Ryan take the technical aspect of that, but that's how I would understand it.
Yeah, I think you got it. I mean, that's the basic idea is you define rules which will say, is this data important? If it's not, then go ahead and drop it on the floor before it goes to the database or really any further than through New Relic's front door.
Excellent.
So some quick thoughts. It is permanent. Because we're dropping it, we can't get it back. So if you drop this data, you're not going to be able to go back. We can't restore it. We have no record of it. It's permanent. We do give you the ability to drop a little or a lot. So what I mean by that is, as you're going to see here in the demo, you can trim a single attribute on a single event type, or you could trim an attribute off of all of an event type. So all your metrics, all your logs, all your events. Then we also want to call out, though, that this means measure twice, drop once. So with the API, there is the ability that you can drop a lot of data very easily. So if you don't specify which metric you want to drop, you could select star and drop all of your metrics. So when you're registering those drop rules, measure twice, drop once.
Also want to point out, this is the nicest haiku I've ever seen about technology.
That is funny. Wow. I love haikus, so that makes me very happy. But enough of these slides. Let's get to the demo.
All right, and this is where I take the wheel. So we're going to go ahead and show you 3 different scenarios where you might want to use data dropping rules. So let's start by looking at a dashboard that is showing us the data we're working with. And this is some fun data. It's actually just coming from Paul's laptop. So, nothing particularly exciting here, but it's good for a demo. And so we have 3 charts. The chart on the left here is the number of metrics in this account that have the host attribute. So we're not limiting this to a particular metric name or a specific metric per se, but the host attribute is present on all of these metrics, and that's what this chart represents. So there's 57 metrics with the host attribute. In the middle, we have a chart showing the number of CPUs on a particular metric, the CPU usage user metric. So let's just look, and I'm pulling up the query for those of you who haven't worked too much with NerdGraph, as we call it directly. It's our query language. If you've worked with SQL, then it might look familiar to you. I look at it all day, so I'm kind of well versed in it, but. So this is, again, so the number of CPUs on this CPU usage user. So that will be for the second part of the demo. And then the third chart on the right here is the count of that last metric we just looked at. So the first part of the demo, we're going to go ahead and strip the host attribute from all metrics. And so I'm going to show you how to define that rule next. Just real quick, I want to show, we have some great documentation around this. So I have that tab loaded up already, and it has, it explains all the different types of data you can drop, why you might drop it, and then also gives you some really nice examples, which you could just copy, paste, and modify. But I'm going to do something more fun. I'm going to go to the GraphiQL UI and just kind of do it by hand to show you what that might look like. So I'll jump on over to GraphiQL, as we call it, which is our kind of thin UI around the GraphiQL API. And you can hit all sorts of New Relic configuration using this API. But right now, we're going to drill into the NerdGraph drop rules feature here.
When I first rejoined New Relic, after GraphiQL had been invented, I submitted a pull request against the repo for documentation, pointing out the typo that they had made in the documentation. But GraphiQL is distinct from GraphQL in that this wraps GraphQL itself, allowing us to do stuff like this.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just kind of a helper to make it easier to build GraphQL queries or requests without knowing the exact syntax. So that's kind of nice, and we'll use that. And so the first thing we're going to do is create a drop rule. So I will check this box, and as you can see over in this kind of area, it's going to start building that request. So we have some red squiggles, which tells us we need more in this request. And GraphiQL tells you what's a required field with the exclamation point at the end of the field. So we know we need both an account ID and we need this rules object. And then now we're getting into the drop rule specific stuff. So the first thing you need to do is define an action. So we kind of briefly glossed over it, but there's two types of things you can do. You can drop attributes from data, but you maintain the data, the data point itself, or you can drop the data point wholesale. And so that's the two actions available in this dropdown are those two things. So for the first rule, we just want to remove that host attribute from all metrics. So we want the drop attributes action. And then the way you tell the drop rule, okay, what am I dropping, is by defining a NRGL string that says, that matches the attribute which you want to drop. So I'm just going to start typing this out and hopefully get it right. So we're going to want to select host from metric. And so, we're currently in the demo account. So this will affect all metrics in that account and drop the host attribute from all of those metrics. I believe, so it's still giving us some red squiggles, and that's just because you have to tell GraphQL to give us back some information about the success or failure of the request. So let's just check all of the the success metadata and failures, just in case I did something wrong, which is, a possibility. And that should be enough. And now we have no more red squiggles, so I should be able to just go ahead and submit this. And you'll see we got back a success object that says, here's my drop attributes rule, here's when it was created, and it gave me an ID, which will be useful later. But for now, we can say, yay, we did it. So if I don't jump back over to the dashboard, we should start seeing that left chart drop to 0 because we no longer have any metrics that have the host attribute. Of course, it takes a little bit of time for that to propagate through the system. So I don't know, Paul, if you want to say something.
Well, yeah, I'll vamp for a second here because it will come quickly and say that, as Ryan alluded to, this is coming off my Mac right now, which is kind of fun. This leverages the area that both Ryan and I work on, the telemetry data platform, which viewers may or may not know you can get a free account for. This is actually a perpetually free account, 100 gigs of ingest free per month, and you get all of these features. And there we go.
Air horn.
We dropped the host attribute.
We dropped the host attribute.
I have a question about that, actually. Does this count? It does count against my ingest limit because it is coming in the door.
It would count against system data limits for how many requests per minute you can get in. But as far as what you'd be billed on, we bill on what we store and on our new Relic 1 pricing. And because this never gets stored, this would not be billed.
Wow. So I can record as much as I want as long as I throw it all away before it comes in.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to see anything. Like now this chart's pretty boring.
But in that sense, the free tier of New Relic 1 comes with infinite free data as long as you have a rule that just is select star, drop everything.
Yeah, again, I mean, I don't know how much value you'd get out of dropping all your data perpetually, but you could, in theory, do that.
Excellent.
Yes. So let's move on to the second phase of the demo. So the second phase is going to be dropping an attribute to a specific metric. So again, we want to drop this CPUs off of the CPU usage user. Of course, that's a bit of an arbitrary thing because, CPUs probably isn't violating any privacy, but for the demo, it at least shows you how it works. So let's go ahead.
I have super secret CPUs on my Mac.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump back over here, and I can probably just take what I have here and modify it a bit. So basically, we just need to change this NRGL. So rather than dropping hosts from all metrics, we want to drop, was it CPUs or CPU? Let's just make sure I get this right. CPU. So we want to drop CPU from metric where, so now we're going to restrict it to that specific metric. So where metric name is equal to, I'm going to copy paste because I'm sure I'll get it wrong otherwise.
He is measuring twice, dropping once.
Exactly, yes.
To reference the haiku.
Yeah, and so be sure, I'm reading through this. I'm making sure this is exactly what I want to drop because it is once it's dropping, it's dropping. Of course, you can delete the rule and then your data will restore, but you'll have a gap. So this is looking right to me. How about you, Paul? Does that look about right?
We got that where clause in there. I'm feeling good.
Got that where clause in there. Feeling good. All right.
In this point you make about being able to delete these rules later, I can delete them, but you had said the ID is going to become important, and I still haven't seen the ID become important. Do I have to have the ID in order to delete it?
Ooh, let's find out. Let's find out. That's a good. We're gonna put a pin.
We're gonna put a pin in it. Oh,
all
pin
right.
it. As a manager, pinning things is my favorite, pretty much. So I pin a lot of things. Let's do it.
All right, I'm gonna switch gears and I'll copy this for later. And let's get out of the create. So GraphQL also has a way of retrieving your existing drop rules as well as other configuration at New Relic, and so we can do that to retrieve that ID. And yes, the ID becomes important when you want to delete a drop rule. So let's do that. So I think this is all documented, but I just know from doing this before that the query section at the top is where you kind of do get requests. So the particular request we want is under this actor object, and then it's under this account object. And then you have to specify the account ID, which autofilled to our demo account. And then NerdGraph drop rules you'll see is right here. And there's only one option, list. And finally, rules. So this is, I define what I want to come back to me from GraphQL. Let's just do it all. Why not? And again, you can do the error in case something goes wrong on the GET request. And red squiggles are gone, and I should be able to hit play. There we go. And so we just have, let me move this over. We just have that one rule that we created, and we can get that ID back. And I guess, did you intend for me to go ahead and delete this one while I'm at it, Paul?
Sure. I mean, we're here. We could delete this one.
All right, so let's do that. So this is the ID 59704. I'm having trouble copy pasting this, so I'll just try and memorize that.
Yeah, so how about we delete this one, and while that's clearing, also register the second drop, and we'll have lots of action back on that dashboard.
Oh, wow, let's do it. Okay.
Do you have that committed to memory?
597, everybody memorize it.
2, 8.
All right, so let's see. So we're going back to the mutation side of things, and we're going to delete, and we'll select the account ID. And then this is a little more simple. We just had to specify the rule IDs. GraphQL is kind of finicky about the format here. So I believe, well, for a single rule, I might be able to just drop in the number. Let's try it. But if it's multiple rules, you have to use like an array syntax. It gets a little tricky, but again, all in the documentation. Successes, let's just do, we don't need everything. We'll just do the ID and the success. Failures, error, reason. Okay, no more red squiggles. Boom, yay, okay, so we deleted it. And per Paul's request here, we're also gonna create the second drop rule, that one on CPU that we put on pause, which I have in my clipboard. So I will also submit that. And we had success on that. So we've deleted the first rule, we've created the second. Now we should start seeing some action in our dash. Hooray! So by deleting that drop rule, the first drop rule, we now see the host attribute returning on all of the metrics. Awesome. And then shortly we should start seeing.
I have a soundboard and I have to use it every time that you say awesome. That's my cue to spin up the audience.
The crowd goes wild.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, again, there's that kind of propagation delay, but we should see it shortly. And, actually, instead of just waiting around, let's get the third rule in place. So the last thing we're going to do is drop the entire wholesale CPU usage user metric. We've decided we don't want any of the attributes on that data, and we're just going to drop that metric altogether. And you can do the same thing on logs or events, and a complete list of what is droppable is in the documentation. But for this, we will do the metric.
And this is dropping metrics in particular is a new feature for some kind of technical and billing. We had not offered that up until about a week or two ago. And so now for our dimensional metrics, our metric API, Prometheus, remote write data, you can drop that whole metric, which again, for all the reasons we went over, could be privacy, could be billing, cardinality, can come in handy. So definitely wanted to show off that since it was previously not allowed. And hey, look.
Hey, there it goes.
It's all gone.
I wanted to see that before I started dropping the whole metric because it might get a little sloppy at that point. So
I want to add one last reason here that you might just hate data, just generally. In which case you
taking
can
out your aggression.
Right. This is your chance to exact your revenge.
Man, does that mean like our data nerd shirts, like they would burn when you put it on?
Yeah.
Data?
I was worried once you dropped all this, your Mac would just slowly start a fire next to you.
Yeah.
I don't know anymore. That's the problem. I'm losing my instrumentation.
All right, so I've already changed the action to drop data, and the only other change in the NRCL is to select star because we want to drop everything. Again, this is where you want to be really careful. You want to have your where clause, specifying your metric name or the conditions under which you want to drop data. Because if you were to do select star from metric, you would drop all of your metrics. And I imagine that is not desirable for the majority of people. So let me go ahead and hit play. Hooray. And now we have success there. And we know this game, this one, well, that might be a little delay in the data, but we might already be dropping those metrics. Yeah, and that's our demo for the most part. Anything else you want to say about that, Paul?
No, we already showed how you can, query to see your existing rules. If you left descriptions, you'd be able to see those. If not, as Ryan went over, the NRCL very much explains what is happening, but descriptions could be leveraged by teams to explain why they're doing something. So maybe, I drop this data, Ryan goes in and looks like, why are we dropping data? And if I leave a description there, it might give him a clue to not drop it. We do also have user permissions that can restrict it. So that's helpful. And then we showed that, while this is permanent and you can't get this data back, you can quickly stop a drop rule. So if you mess up, you would be able to undo it, or if you change your mind or fix the cardinality issue, you can restore the metric or attributes across the account here.
So I have a quick question about that query that you were showing us, the NRCL query. Is there a world in which I typo that thing and inadvertently throw away everything? If I say metriname instead of metric name, it does some level of syntax validation.
Right. So I think in your specific example, it wouldn't work at all because there is no attribute metroname. But yes, you are correct in that I imagine there are ways you could shoot yourself in the foot a little bit here. So I recommend, go to the query bar, run some form of the query that you plan to define a drop rule against, just to validate that it's what you want to do before you drop.
My traditional approach then of add all the drop rules at 5:30 p.m. on a Friday and walk right out the door, you'd recommend against that.
I would recommend being freshly caffeinated in the morning.
Okay.
When you do this.
Excellent.
And I think that's it for us.
That's a wrap. Thank you so much for coming on the episode. I actually wrote a haiku for you during our little thing here. Thank you for coming and teaching me to lose data. Data is the worst.
Oh.